Hi, welcome to the Superintendent Housing Task Force final recommendation public meeting. My name is Lisa Dameron. I teach at Basalt Middle School. I am the secretary of the Roaring Fork Community Education Association, and I am a parent. Our housing task force was composed of all 5 school board members, plus 14 community members, which included teachers, parents, other district employees, and community members. The board members were present at the meetings and participated, but did not vote at the final meeting and did not have a voice in composing the final recommendations. We had 5 meetings in May and June of this year. Our goal was to research and explore options for housing, to assist with recruitment and retention of RFSD superintendents, and to make a recommendation to the board.
Hi, my name is Daisy Fogelsong. I'm a teacher at Crystal River Elementary. I also am a parent of a former student. And I'm going to explain the 7 options that we initially looked at when trying to find a solution for housing for our superintendent position. Number 1 was to buy a house, which would be a district-owned asset, but purchased on the market. Number 2 would be to build a house on district land or in partnership with the developer. That would also be a district-owned asset and available to the superintendent. Number 3 was down payment assistance, also known as an equity investment. This would be where the district helps the superintendent to buy a house in exchange for the district owning a partial stake in the house. All of these will be explained a little bit more in detail later on. Number 4 is the possibility of a housing stipend. Number 5 is a buy down of a free market house. Number 6 is pursuing philanthropic donations to purchase a home. And number 7 would be to include the superintendent in existing staff housing, which we already have. Okay, so I'm sorry, we had an additional thing added that we did remember, and that was number 8, which was to do nothing. And that was an option we thought about.
We started by looking at what other districts were doing. And we knew that we had to do something because the consultant from the hiring process did join our committee via a phone call. And he reported that virtually every candidate said they would need some sort of housing assistance. So when we started looking at the choices, we eliminated the do nothing option. Districts that do provide housing or actual houses for their superintendents are Aspen, Telluride, and we also looked at Park City, Utah. Other area districts in our geographic region do not offer housing. Those districts are Eagle, Garfield, RE2, Delta, and Mesa.
So we worked as a group to try to narrow down our options. We broke up into smaller groups and did a fair amount of research looking into all the different 8, well, I guess we didn't look into doing nothing. We looked into the 7 that were originally listed there and researched what they had to offer and compared them in different districts. And then we set priorities of which ones to keep. And we did a protocol where we were able to quote unquote spend points. We each had dots that we could put on the ones that we felt were the most promising. And we worked to narrow that down to purchasing a home, building a home, and this is so tiny, the graph is tiny, and the equity investment. And so then we worked further on those 3.
I'm Kendall Riley. I'm the assistant principal at Crystal River Elementary, and I'm also a member of the staff housing committee, and I've been on that for 8 years. I think one thing that I do want to bring up from what Lisa and Daisy were sharing is that we came in as a group with very disparate opinions, people who were all in on this, people who thought we absolutely did not need to do anything. And we did come out with the idea that we need to do something or look at doing something. So we came up with the three options that Daisy was describing through that dot process, but we were not ready to walk out and just give those to the board. We felt like we needed to look at some more detail in those recommendations. So I'm going to go into those with Alan's help. For building, we are lucky in that we own a significant amount of land throughout the district that could be good for building single family homes on. And then we would build a house on that property, reserve it for the superintendent. If the superintendent didn't want it, it could go to executive team members or someone else who needed a house. We felt very strongly that the house needed to be modest. We had some examples of what modest could mean, that it needed to be suitable for a range of families and sizes of families. We were very strongly in agreement that it needed to be within Roaring Fork School District boundaries, at the point of building was to do it on district owned land, and that we would keep it consistent with how we treat all of our staff housing. So they would pay rent, they would have a similar lease term, they would have similar rules and a similar rent structure as our staff housing program. And if we could, since we were building, we try and make it ADA compliant. Buying was pretty similar. We also felt really strongly that it would be modest. This would be buying a house that's already up on the free market or partnering with a developer who was building so that we could get in on that project. Same thing, that we wanted it to be modest. We need it to be suitable for a range of families and living situations, to be within school district boundaries, and that they would pay rent for that, again, corresponding to the staff housing guidelines. We have done both of these things, buy and build, in the staff housing program. We have bought and partnered with developers, and we have also built our own right next to the Third Street Center. And the HOA fees for that one is one that goes along with our staff housing guidelines. So for example, if we were to buy in Aspen Glen, the membership to the club would be on the person, the HOA membership, or the rest of the HOA fees. I'm sorry, long day. They would pay any HOA fees in addition to paying rent. And then with that, we did want to recommend to the staff housing committee that they update their guidelines, and so that we can be correspondent with that and have superintendent housing ownership guidelines, so that they cannot own a house in the district, but that we are not looking at their assets. We're not looking at if they own a house outside of the district. Right now in staff housing, if you own a house outside of the district, you have a year to sell. We recommend that committee looks at removing that guideline as well, so that they're all aligned. The final thing we looked at, the final of our top three, was equity investment. And the other two, we were able to come to some clear consensus on what those guidelines would look like. For the equity investment, we were very, very torn. There were a lot of pieces we still needed to look at. We did all find it really interesting that you were basically investing money in the housing market, and the district could make money off of this idea. We definitely wanted it to be in the district. We definitely wanted to make sure that it would be protected from asset depreciation if the market fluctuated. And we were thinking about this in terms of the whole thing, in terms of the superintendent position and not a specific person. But we did have a lot more questions around equity investment than we could come to a consensus on. And Alan's going to talk more about that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alan Munoz Valenciano. Do I need the microphone? Oh, for the recording? Okay, cool. Never mind. So I work as regional manager for Voces Unidas de las Montañas, a nonprofit here, and work very closely with the community of Roaring Fork School District. So as Kendall was mentioning, the equity investment was a very complicated kind of option that we explored, but we thought it would be interesting in the sense of figuring out what those terms look like. But, you know, we want to make sure that there's continued exploration for a board to look at this option as viable. You know, including a needs assessment to see if superintendent needs assistance in purchasing a home. Also specifically in terms of, you know, an option that can make money for the district, you know, the district's equity stake in payback terms. An example was a 3% equity stake for every 1% provided. And, you know, that would be a return on investment and be able to recoup its costs and additional equity, which is sort of the intriguing part. But also it was undetermined whether fiscally possible to develop such a program for all staff, because that was something that we, you know, explored, that this be an opportunity. If it is a program, we could help teachers, faculty members, you know, whoever in the Roaring Fork School District to a program like this. And then also we explored this organization of the company called Landed, which had done this in the past, but just wanted to know why it isn't something that they offer anymore, that they do anymore. And those are just some of the things that we wanted further exploration on, further clarification on, in the hopes that a board, if they do want to take this route, could figure out those questions, can figure out the answers to those questions in a meaningful and feasible way. Now I want to pass it to one of our board members.
So we were asked to add an update of the work that the board has done over the summer and an explanation of, can you hear me? Yeah. Of the board's meetings. So the board has met, I think, 3 times over the summer in executive session to discuss this. Executive sessions are not open to the public and they are protected under state law. They're discussions that, for policy reasons, as determined by the legislature, are not meant to be public. Specifically, this one related to personnel. And the reason that the board has not made these public purposefully is because the board's discussion and position on a potential benefit to a future candidate could then be used by that future candidate in negotiating and could be used against us. And so it was to our advantage as a district not to make those discussions public. The board has not taken any specific action on superintendent housing. We're still going through this process, but as we put out in our update earlier this month, we've asked staff for further information on the buy build options, and to come back with us or come back to us on specific information on those 2. And so if and when action is taken, that would be done by vote of the board.
So we kept our presentation really brief. For those who came late, we can go back and go share some of the slides again. But we really just wanted to make a lot of time available for questions. So we really want this to feel like a conversation. If you want to come join us in the circle, you're welcome to come join us. We do need everyone to use a mic though, as we do questions and have a conversation.
Yeah, so if you want to ask a question, just let me know and I'll bring the mic to you.
So I wasn't able to ascertain where, have you come down one way or another on, are you, I know you haven't made a decision yet, but is there a recommendation that you all are leaning towards? And yes, there is, or no?
I think Alan wants to take it.
Well, the what was it, 5 meetings ish over the course of that full month. These were the recommendations. So these are the 3 recommendations. We didn't come down to 1 just because, we thought they were better for the district. And what the slides that you see, I guess, to specifically answer your question, in the way that we came up with how we narrowed it down to the top 3 was sort of a ranking system. So where we gave more points, if you will, to an option compared to others the point of this was to sort of keep exploration and options open.
Right.
So we didn't just come out and say, we want you to build a house, or we
Right.
want you to buy a house, or we want you to do this. It was more given the option, because ultimately the board will have that decision.
So the build a house on land, that's one of them, right? I mean,
Yes.
yes, that's right. Okay.
Yes. Our 3 that we narrowed down was recommendation to build, recommendation to, if the clicker will work. It did. Recommendation to buy, or the recommendation of equity investment. However, as I was mentioning earlier, the equity investment, there was a lot more things that we wanted clarification on, or more exploration by a board to figure out that option.
So it's build, buy, or equity investment, and equity investment is kind of complicated. Yeah. Okay.
Question.
Thank you. I'm Carrie Worth, a longtime Valley resident and substitute teacher for the school district, I'm happy to say. And of the 3 options, first, I want to thank all of you for all your work and efforts into this. I know hours and hours have gone into it and a lot of thinking and sweat equity. So thank you. Being in the Valley a long time and knowing how hard our janitors and teachers work, The only option I see is the build and rent to make it similar to the rental units we've already built for the lottery to go into. I just wanted to say, I know teachers, janitors who have retired at a lower pay than what they were making before the recession hit. So until some of those pay for the lower people can be brought back up, given that we're in current prices have gotten a lot more expensive. As a community member with my tax dollars going to the highest paid person in the school district, the highest benefit, and the most asking, it seems to me that there's a power play that take it or leave it, and we have to go someplace else. And I hate to think that you guys are putting that on someone who I understand family needs, but at the first started to take family leave the first day of school. That did not look well in the community. So the community, from the feedback I'm getting, is that this person that we're doing all these things for is doing what to be here for the people who are on the ground. The teachers who are in classroom, the janitors that are cleaning up the buildings every night. And believe me, they should be making more. Our cafeteria workers, our administration. You know, you guys are holding the fort down and you're still doing a great job. And I don't see that support coming from the other direction. So I cannot see the other two options, not only being financially advisable, but to support all the people who are on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I would just like to add, do you know what slide it was on? That the reason why we came, so one of the options was initially that we're looking at was to do nothing, right? And we very quickly eliminated that as an option because we knew that we wanted to be competitive in a superintendent search whenever it was. So I would just like to reiterate and clarify for everyone that the work that we did as a task force was to come up with a solution for any future superintendent or for any future board to have in their pocket during negotiations, not necessarily for any one superintendent in particular. I just want to clarify that.
First, thanks for being a substitute teacher. As an assistant principal who's in charge of finding those, I really appreciate that. We'll see you at Crystal River tomorrow if you'd like. I was going to say pretty much what Alan was like. We really wanted to keep this process about the position and not about the person. And talking to Max from HYA, I think was part, like, as I said, we all came into it with very disparate opinions. And talking to Max from HYA, I think was really powerful for all of us in terms of like realizing the need for this. And that's also one of the reasons why we in Buy and Build, we were looking at taking away that ownership restriction outside of the district, because it's about finding someone a place to land in the valley. Because as you were saying, like the cost of housing is going up so much and it's just hard for anybody to find anywhere. And then once you're here, it gets a little better and you know people and you're able to like find a place for everybody a little more smoothly. But it's that initial landing spot and being able to say, we have a space for you to live in our district. And that's important for everybody from custodians all the way up. Not that the custodian is the bottom. Dean Black runs my school. But that it's important for everybody.
Go ahead.
I just want to add that we do have 50 new units coming in Meadowood that are available for all staff. So we have not forgotten about the custodians and the substitute teachers and the cafeteria workers and the teachers.
It's for Zoom. The other thing that I just wanted to make note of is that part of the work that this task force did was looking not just at other superintendents, but other similarly situated CEOs of organizations within the Valley. And within our Valley, our tax dollars are going to support housing stipends for our town managers. Our city managers receive housing stipends, and those are all tax dollars as well. So this isn't a totally new thing within our Valley. I think it's a different way to think of it. But it's happening within systems throughout our Valley. And I think that's something else for us to keep in mind, because within those systems too, right? Like the lovely person that I see changing the trash every morning at Arbany Park and Basalt certainly is not earning the over $200,000 salary that our town manager is, who is also receiving a stipend. But that is the nature of the beast that we're dealing with. And whether we agree with it or not, unfortunately, that's what we are operating within. And I just wanted to point that out because I think sometimes it's hard for us to get outside of the vacuum of the school system. But we do have to, we as a board have been looking at it, and this task force did look at all of that other information as well to try to take that into account.
And so I just want to say I appreciate all the efforts that the housing task has gone to come up with a solution or suggestions for the solution. I know that we need something for a superintendent in the future going forward. And that being said, I just want to know if we could speak to what's going on with the present superintendent. Did he come here with the agreement that we would give him something like that or not? And what's the deal with him buying a house in Denver?
So the only agreement was an agreement to agree, which is not an agreement. It was that the board would continue to look into it, which we've done actively
Yes.
and continue to do. There's no other agreement that we would provide housing. If there were, that would have been enforceable. And I imagine that there would have been some attempt to enforce that, right?
Right. So there's no obligation for us to provide him something,
There's
but
no obligation. at
right.
all. Yeah.
So we need to look forward for the, yes, I'm fully
So
on
this
board.
is really like the task force was saying, we looked at this for the role. And so that this is a tool in the belt of not necessarily this board, but whatever board, whoever's sitting in these seats, it's a tool in their tool belt for hiring. Because as they said, it became really clear that we knew because we went through the process, but I think having the task force also hear directly that almost every candidate was going to require housing assistance.
So
to make that clear.
would you be willing to give us some updates on what's going on with our present superintendent and the housing situation on that?
So there's nothing that we can provide that isn't already public. We can't speak to personnel issues just as we can't to any other employee within the district. And just as we wouldn't, right? That's something that's protected by state law.
Okay.
I would like to just add one more thing to what Catherine Kohlenberg said about when we got involved in talking about the future. And it wasn't upon having the discussion when it was brought up about doing something for our current superintendent, as we were hiring for superintendent and as we had people applying for the superintendent. At that point, 20 out of 22 people who applied said they would need some kind of housing assistance in order to be considering the job. And so it was before we ever hired. Understanding that we need to be doing something looking towards this in the future. And so this was prior to us hiring our superintendent that we realized there is something that we needed to do.
Hi, is that working? I'm Nancy Batcheldor, and Terry, I appreciate your words. And I think I really appreciate you guys, all the effort that you're putting in. Coming from Pitkin County before, I lived down in this valley, and now what's going on up there, you know, we're losing two amazing physicians up there because they never, in 3 years or 5 years, I think they've been here, they haven't been able to find housing. And so I think that making sure that the school district has the ownership of the housing is really important, because it's not, the house doesn't go with the person who is there, but the house goes with the school, so that you have that to offer. So I appreciate your choices that you came up with. So I just think, that's my input, is that we got to make sure the school district owns it.
And that was a feeling that we all had. We were pretty aware of the climate, and we knew that keeping the asset in the hands of the district was what would be acceptable to the community.
Knowing that I just saw a recent lottery for a 3-bedroom unit within the school district that it already has. Is it possible for the short term, if you do choose build, because that isn't going to appear, for a solution to possibly give a 1-year or 2-year, whatever the build thing will be, to designate that? Because I haven't been in any, but they look lovely from what I've seen, especially some of them have amazing views of Sopris. Could that be a possible interim solution to provide that housing until the build could be completed?
Was that a district-owned house that went up for the lottery?
That's my understanding. I believe it came from the school district.
We did consider opening up the current district housing to the executive team, but that would need a lot of reworking with the guidelines. And I don't know if you want to speak to that, Kendall.
And we also, there's 2 pieces there. One is, it was commonly said that the superintendent wouldn't qualify for a unit in staff housing. Any employee is welcome to apply. With the current guidelines, if you make above the median income, it's unlikely you'll get a unit unless nobody below the median income applies. When we first developed staff housing, we really only needed housing for people making below our median income. Now we need housing for everybody. So we are looking at reworking our staff housing guidelines. We also, that's a process. We have the Meadowood units coming online, which will open more units. Right now we have, Ben, the current numbers better than I do. It was like 30 applicants for the last 1-bedroom. So even if we gave everybody a slot, like, it's unlikely that, just because of pure odds. But we did look at using it as a stopgap measure. It is tricky sometimes when you have someone who is able to fire someone living with them or living in very close proximity. That is one thing that we are mindful of, and it might be weird if you are a first-year teacher to live next to your superintendent. But it's definitely a thought that that's like a tool that we didn't feel like we needed to say, yes, board, do this, or no, board, don't do that, but a tool that's available.
Having lived next to several school board superintendents throughout the valley, because we're a small valley, I can understand some of the angst. However, you can't dictate, even if you bought a home somewhere, who the neighbors are going to be. So
Yes.
that's a difficult prediction to try to make.
It's a tool that if the board chose to build a house and somebody needed an interim measure, it's definitely a tool we could explore. We didn't say no.
Thanks. Thanks for all this great work. I noticed that no one seemed to want to explore the philanthropy option. But did you discuss, given that the district owns so much land, how you could use services outside of the typical market-based economy? So habitat or other offerings from civil society to get a place built below market costs on existing land?
I can start that one. We definitely talked about that. We talked about some of the classes at some of the high schools who work on building. And then we felt like some of those details were not really for us to dive super into, but that would be really cool if it worked out. I think, Ben, I don't know if you want to speak any more to that.
Yeah, I think as Kendall said, like, the district is has a lot of land. And so that's our main asset. And then cost of construction. I think if we decided to go that route, we would investigate all the ways to keep that down. I mean, Habitat in particular, they have their own income guidelines and the superintendent wouldn't qualify under those. So, and it requires, sweat equity. You have to put in hundreds of hours to help build your house. So there's some things that just, the typical concept of affordable housing doesn't fit well with a highly paid employee, but the need, as the board has discussed, is this is still there in our unusual housing market.
In a lot of these recommendations that we put or that we gave out to the board, there's a lot of nuanced details and questionings that we just didn't have either the knowledge to explore or the knowledge to sort of give advice on, the time to sort of explore those little details. And we thought it would be up to the board whenever, whoever the sits on that board, whenever that is, to really find out and handle those details.
The philanthropy option is not dead. It's just sort of a satellite option that requires a lot of work to explore. There is a nonprofit organization that has been formed that is still looking into possibilities. Do you want to speak about that, Catherine? No, okay. Yeah, send us a house.
Again, I want to thank you for all of your input and the multi facets with the philanthropy and all of it. Given your insights about it's not about a person, it's about sustainability and for the school district. Yay, I appreciate that. And I encourage whoever the public information officer is to make sure that information gets out there, that we're looking to be sustainable down the road versus it being a stopgap for where we are now. Because in the public information I've been reading, I've somehow not put those together till this meeting tonight.
I wondered if you all had considered look any prefab houses to just put on the land. There are some really cheap options that are actually pretty cool now, and the delivery is they fold up into a size that you don't have to get a wide load certification or anything like that. So anyway, it's kind of a out of the box option maybe, and no pun intended. It's the name of the company is Boxable. I don't know. Elon Musk is actually going to buy one. So, but they're pretty cool. They're like, you can kind of create bigger buildings by adding them together and things. I don't know.
We didn't get that far into the build option. I think that the district is now taking it over, and I don't know how far along they've gotten, but I know that they're looking at all sorts of possibilities.
Yeah.
And I just want to introduce Linda, who was also on the housing task force. So thank you for participating and coming tonight. Linda Hoffman.
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for all their work too. And it was very considerate, intentional, and thorough. You guys did an amazing job, guys and girls. I just wanted to put out there too that we appreciated the options, right? Because there's not a one size solution or one solution. Whoever is selected as a superintendent candidate is going to go through contract negotiations, and whoever that person is could all have different circumstances, right? Somebody could be at the end of their career and have a house and doesn't need this option. Somebody could just be starting out and have a young family and It needs, so having those options to negotiate with is really going to put the board in a much better position to negotiate for what's best for the school district. So having those different options was a nice way to present what you found. But I did want to make everybody aware of that too, is like, we don't know who's coming or what they're coming with. So everybody's going to need something different.
Thank you for letting me talk again. Thank you. Thank you for what you said, Maureen. And I agree, it's great to have that in the toolbox. And I wanted to bring up the negotiating. Most people negotiate their terms before they're hired. So it seems, again, in my mind, a little that some things have collided to confuse one project with the current person. So with that in mind, again, sorry for it's your job to separate those out, that it's, and is this something we're really doing for moving forward? Or is this something with the person who's currently in place that is a go or no go to keep them? I mean, is there a new contract negotiation in place now that they've been hired? I don't know if you can address those. Those are just questions the community may want to know.
Sure, I can address those. So as Kenny said, this was on our radar prior to narrowing down the candidate pool, prior to going through the interview process last spring, right? Like this was identified for us as an issue when I was looking back through my own emails in early March of 2022, when we were going through the process, when we were just, I think, 5 weeks into the process, we were still in community discussions, and the consultants were already saying, what are you doing about housing? And so we were already starting to have those discussions then. So for us as a board, this has always been a long-term, we have to figure this out for the district, which again is why we didn't enter into any sort of binding agreement last spring or make an agreement last spring saying we're going to do this right away, because we felt like it did require a lot more intensive time, research, thought, and we spent a lot of time doing that over, the following 9 months trying to come up with some solutions. So yeah, it's really hard to separate it, right? But I will just reiterate that for us, it has been separate. In our discussions, it has been, we have to look at this for the role of superintendent, whoever may be sitting there. And again, that's why it is complicated when you're sitting in this position as a board member, because you're thinking about having to go into those contract negotiations. And if you come in with a candidate who has assets to buy a home, but your previous candidate was getting a housing stipend, are you going to have to supplement the next person's income with the amount of the stipend? Like, you're thinking about all these different things and how multiple candidates, multiple superintendents are going to look at that benefit, and how that impacts the district financially long-term. So for us as a board, it has always been about a long-term solution. And I think if it wasn't, we would have acted, right? Like we wouldn't be where we are right now. So.
And just in addition to that, one of our pillars that we stand on as a district is recruiting and retaining the best employees that we can. And we want to make sure that that is on the superintendent end also. And we understand the role that the superintendent plays in this district, and wanting to make sure that we have that leadership and the ability to get the best leader we can in that position.
And I just want to support that. Again, as a community member, we want to give you tools to be able to do that, just like we want the best teachers and we want the best for our children and growth. Again, having lived next to superintendents, the Aspen superintendent lived in Aspen on Snow Bunny Lane, right down with all the teachers, right next to them all, and they didn't live on Red Mountain or other more exclusive places. So I just want you to keep in mind that the question is, our former superintendent, I understand, lived in Glenwood. I don't know that they lived in I don't know exactly where Rob Starnes lived, but I thought it was not necessarily in a higher, like Starwood or something. So I just want to keep it real that yes, we want to provide them housing that is safe, that is bigger than a 1-bedroom or a studio apartment, that it will accommodate a family that is growing. But we can't exceed the moon. So with the build, I think that's great.
The specifications for buy and build are very similar. They both specify a modest home, median price in the valley, approximately 3 bedrooms, approximately 2,000 square feet or less. We are not going to be building a mansion for the superintendent or buying one. We want a quality house for a quality superintendent.
And I know I said Aspen Glen when I was talking about HOA fees. That was the first thing that pops into my mind. We are not thinking about Aspen Glen.
And the board did have via Zoom, the recruiter talk to us that actually did the recruiting, which was honestly very, very helpful. And as I said, did help us to understand better where they were coming from. And I will say one of the things they did stress was modest, and that's why it is, I mean, it's part of why it's in all of the recommendations, because we do realize that if it isn't modest, then that's going to open up a whole nother can of worms. But that's exactly what the recruiter's word, he said more than once in their meeting, was modest. And he gave an example in Palo Alto, a 2-bedroom townhome. I think we're looking for a house, and I think that makes sense in our valley, but there were other examples given that yes, they are provided in other areas. It is not uncommon, but definitely you want to be careful. So we're in agreement with that.
I just wanted to say, I think this term modest will be one of the harder parts of this going forward, and different people's perception of that. And if you say median price, that's a lot more specific than modest. That's a very big number. And so I just hope the community is prepared for the numbers that we're going to be talking about. If we're actually talking about buying, are very large numbers. And the cost of construction is very high as well. So we can think modest from some time in the past, and then you can think realistic about what it is today. And I hope we're ready to think realistically if the board decides to move in this direction.
Can we hear what specifics on what you mean by median price? Like what are you thinking about? Like what price wise?
Well, not what we're thinking about, but the current median price from Carbondale to Glenwood is about $1.2 million. If you look at current real estate listings and look at what the median is. So just, I'm not saying that that's the number that the board is going to go with or anything like that, but that doesn't line up with people's notion of modest, I think. And so there's kind of an inherent conflict there. And the cost of construction is very high as well. So they're big numbers.
We're selling a house in Redstone, just saying. It's within the boundaries, so.
What's that?
But the median price of a house then at 1.2 million, that's including land. And if the school district has the land, the price should not be near that much, because land is our most valuable commodity.
We're currently the school district. I'm Chief Operating Officer Ben Baumfalk, for those of you who don't know me. We're currently building the 50 units that were mentioned over here at Meadowwood, and that's coming out to about, this is not exact, but about $500 a square foot. So again, you start to do the math on that, and we own the land. So things are just very expensive, you know, if you talk to anybody in real estate or construction here right now. So I just think that that's a next challenge, is that once we start to get into those details, people's notion of modest versus the reality here right now and what's actually possible might be two different things.
But keeping in mind that this is a long-term investment, I think is really helpful, that it is a lot of money. And I agree, it's good. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that is good for the community and all of us to keep in mind. But to me, we just have to keep reminding ourselves, this is a long-term investment.
Yeah, that it's really helpful to hear those numbers because it's quite breathtaking. But also the reality. And so I think it'll be an interesting task of the district to communicate effectively, Jonathan, about the challenges and the definition of a median modest home. And if that's what the district decides to go with, I can just foresee some challenges in communicating that 1.2 million is appropriate home. But if you spend time looking at Zillow around the valley, you know that is the reality, and that's not houses in Aspen Glen or wherever. That really is the like bizarre market economy we live in.
I too want to thank you for clarifying the median income and the range, because at first I thought I just saw a property sold for 45 million in Aspen. So that changes. So knowing that the parameters are within the school district, the median value, and we've got great searchers and things, and hopefully we'll come in under that. But I think keeping that clear, the boundaries of where you're looking at that median cost will be helpful to those of us who are reading.
Yes, I'll just say we're going to be transparent and fulsome in how we describe what we're doing in this process.
It's 5:50. So our tentative plan was that if there are other questions for the whole group, we can take a couple more questions whole group, but then we are happy to stick around and make sure that if you want to talk more, that you could talk, but to give people a chance to take off as well. So if there are other questions that people want to ask to the whole group.
I just had one more question, and I'm sorry I came in late too. But now that you've re-explained the buy option versus the build, and thank you, Ben, for your input, enlightening as usual. And I just want to make sure whether we build or buy, that the fourth or fifth point down that says it's going to be consistent with agreements with staff housing, so rent will be paid, similar lease terms and rules, all those things will be in place. So it is a possession of the school district and not a gift to the current person.
And
thank you.
These are all our recommendations, and in contract negotiations, that's not for this task force to decide. So this is what we recommend, knowing that staff housing is also continually evolving.
Any other questions? Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.